Okay, good morning, everyone. It's great to have you join this webinar today. My name is Sandrine van Oudijk. I'm leading the Zero Waste Living Lab, and today we have a webinar to talk about how to scale the reuse revolution. And we will hear from different speakers on how to best do that. So today, first, you will hear a little bit of background about the Zero Waste Living Lab by me, myself. Then I will hand over to the country director for the Zero Waste Living Lab in Indonesia, Jesse, who will tell you a little bit more about what's happening in Indonesia at the moment in the Zero Waste Living Lab. And then we have three amazing speakers who will join us from different perspectives to talk about how to scale the reuse revolution. And I'm really grateful to have them on board. Some of them even join in the middle of the night, Brian. So fingers crossed that all goes well with technology. We have also Kumala joining from all the way from Indonesia, co-founder and CEO of Hepi Circle, and Emma Priestland from BreakFreeFromPlastic. So you will hear more about them in a minute. I also want to thank the participants for joining. We will have a session that lasts until 10, and we have reserved about half an hour after that for a Q&A. So I would very much like to invite everyone to stay on for the Q&A. But of course, if you have other obligations, feel free to leave after the session has finished up. So I will briefly start explaining a little bit about the Zero Waste Living Lab and about NVU. So NVU is the organization behind the Zero Waste Living Lab. We basically are a social venture building studio, which means that we set up business models that do good, that create large-scale impact in the world, and that put impact first and profit second. So it's all about creating self-sustaining and continuously growing vehicles for change. We have offices in the Netherlands, in India, Kenya, Chile, and in Indonesia. And from our theory of change is that by developing these businesses, we develop new markets, and from that perspective, we really create scalable change in the economy. So our starting point for the work on plastics and on reuse was basically this note that there's a truckload of plastic entering our oceans every minute, which of course is shocking. And we also know at the same time that this is not going to stop. So we will see a plastic quadruple by 2050, plastic peak reaching only in 2100. And if you look at the best case scenario of recycling, we will still not be able to recycle nearly half of all of that plastic we put out in the market. So basically the only reasonable way forward where we need to put a lot of effort in is in redesigning the way we get products to people and innovate and scale business models that reduce the use of packaging in the first place. So that is basically the philosophy and the idea behind the Zero Waste Living Lab, which we set up as a global showcase to reduce single-use plastics, starting on Java in Indonesia, by reaching at least 50,000 consumers, reducing ideally at least 20,000 tons of plastic packaging a year, well, avoiding it, that's to say. And from there, scaling up this movement to a lot of other markets, and especially the business models, of course, that we build to have them scale up to a lot of other markets. So how do we do this? We have basically three strategies. The first is to scale together with local entrepreneurs. The second is that we replicate successful business models from elsewhere to Indonesia. And the third is that we ideate our own ventures. So we create a portfolio of these social enterprises that allow consumers to have a zero waste lifestyle. What it very much fits with this theory of change is that we will create a exponential impact because all of these ventures will grow on an exponential curve. That's our ambition, and also thereby because we set them up as business models, they will be self-sustaining when they get on their own feet. So this is really, we aim for really a lot of impact, and this is just in Indonesia. So we have plans to take this to a lot of other geographies as well. So um, personally very excited about it. And now I would like to hand over to my colleague in Indonesia, Jesse, who will tell you a little bit more about the ventures that we are currently building within the Zero Waste Living Lab, and just give you like a very brief update on where we're standing before we dive into the amazing speakers of today. So Jesse, I would like to give you the floor now.
Yes, am I audible?
Yes.
Okay, so yes, as mentioned by my colleague Sandrine, I've been the country director for our activities in Jakarta, Indonesia, now since September last year when I moved here. Before I was heading the activities of NGO in India, but since September working on the plastics issue here. So that also means that the five startups and pre-startups that we're working on until now, is most of the work has been done since September, so relatively short. But we feel that this is really a good moment to start projects in Indonesia. So I think we've made quite some progress already. The first startup where we are working on is called Hepi, which you see on the left. That's a startup that was already running, and we joined it as a co-founder. What Hepi does is that they provide vegetables and fruits farm to fork. So directly, you order directly on an app or on the website from the farmer. After your order, Hepi picks up the vegetables and the fruit from the farmers, delivers them to the doorstep of the consumer in Jakarta, and in that whole process does not use any single-use plastics. So achieving a lot of impact, not just because there is no waste, but also because there's no food waste in this process, because everything is fresh. And we also make sure that the farmer receives a good amount for their products. So impact made on a lot of different aspects, but plastics definitely being an important one of them. Then we are working on another project by the name of Copita. This is a replication of an existing project by the name of News that is currently being set up in San Francisco and Singapore. What Copita does is that it allows people to, when they order a coffee to go, to take their coffee in a reusable cup, in a tumbler like you can see on the picture. So the consumer doesn't pay for that. Instead, they pay a deposit for the cup, and they get the deposit back once they return the cup, which they eventually can do in a number of coffee stores or in a deposit point. We've done now first pilots for Copita successfully. We figured out the business model, and at this point in time, we want to expand it in the next month to around 20 stores in Jakarta. The third venture, we set this up ourselves in September, but already now it has received its first round of investment, so it's going really fast. It goes by the name of Econesia. What it does is that it helps other businesses with very straightforward supply chains to reduce their single-use plastics. Now, to make that very tangible, we use, I'm not sure if you can see me, but we use, for example, a system of water filters and glass bottles to make sure that hotels and restaurants can provide their customers with mineral water quality water, but then without the single-use packages. So like that, we've identified a few fairly straightforward opportunities to make companies like hotels, offices, restaurants go without single-use packaging fairly easy. And it has been working out quite well, so we've signed up on the first customers already. Then we are working on a number of pilots. They are not all included in the sheet yet, but I would still like to mention two. The first now goes by the name of Wash By, where we basically provide detergent to laundry stores in reusable packages. In Jakarta, it's common for most people to not do their laundry at home, but to send it to the store where they'll do it for you. So there's many of these stores, and they mostly just buy the normal detergent in this kind of packaging in the normal 4 or 5 liter bottles. It's not reusable. So what we have done is that we've tied up with a local supplier of detergents. We have designed a reusable 10-liter packaging. So for the laundry stores, that's very client friendly because they spend less because they buy in bigger quantities. And we then deliver the reusable package and we collect the empty ones. So we've done the design around that model already, and we have just started a pilot where we actually sell the product to a number of stores to test how this works out in the market. And the first response has been good, but it's only been 2 weeks. So it's still very early. The last pilot project goes by the name of Zero Waste Warung. For the ones who are not so familiar in Indonesia, Warung stores are the very small stores on the street, mostly informal businesses where people sell all kinds of products, mostly in very small packaging, like the ones here. So single-use packaging in the truest sense of the word, because most are actually just used once and then they're already empty. So what we want to do is create a deposit system where people will pay a small deposit instead of a single-use package. They get their product in a reusable package. They then return the package to the store owner, and through a tech-enabled track and trace system, the consumer gets a small, like some points where later they can receive discounts in the store. And we collect the data as well as the empty package, and we send it back to the supplier so that it can be filled again with a product and be sold in the store again. We just started this, so we are hopeful that we can start this in the first Warung stores in March this year. So still very early stage. But I think in the end, one of the projects that can have the biggest impact. Yeah, then very briefly, the team in Jakarta, which is led by me, we are still expanding the team. So I hope that if we would have this presentation in a couple months from now, it will have around 4 more faces. But other than me in Jakarta, we have Tauhid, Bagas, and Pandu who are working with me on the different projects. Soon already 3 new people will be joining as well for the new pilots. And from the Netherlands, of course, Sandrine and Anne, who are helping us out from there.
Thank you, Jesse. That's been a great update for the audience to hear what the Zero Waste Living Lab has been up to in the past months. Now it is time to switch to the core of our program. And I would like to give a warm digital hands of, how do you say that? Warm round of applause for Kumala Susanto. She is the co-founder and CEO of Hepi Circle. You guys started with a pilot on refill delivery system for local rooms, originally done by women on bikes. And now you really brought Hepi Circle to a different market, to a new market segment, and you have been changing your customer proposition. It's great to have you here today. And as a first question, I would love to ask of you, can you take our audience to Surabaya? So imagine we live there. How would Hepi Circle work for them?
Yeah, if you were in Surabaya, we're actually delivering products for you in, yeah, simply because it's reusable packaging. You can get the refills, or you can swap the packaging. Like we have the system for the water and also the gas in Indonesia. but they have in bigger packaging, but we want to make it smaller for products such as soap, rice, and other cleaning products like that you use daily. That's why we want to tackle that problems, because it's used daily. It means that the plastic will be disposed daily as well. So we're actually it depends on you. Some of our customers like refilling their soap better than packaging swap, and some of our customers want a fast transaction. That's why we have this swap system as well. So if you see that we want to start the great habits, so this is our new campaign for Hepi Circle. So it's really nice to hear in Bahasa Indonesia, awal kebiasaan balik, or in English, the beginning of great habits. So we want to go with our customers to start little by little, step by step, to make a good habits without judging others and everything. So because we're doing our best for that. So next we will, if you want to see our business models. So I cannot change it. Sorry. Right. So basically, this is the business model. Why we are changing from the low income markets to a bit middle to upper markets, because we saw that there is a lack of educational and information and awareness of the low income markets about the issues. So financially speaking, that we want to survive in the business. So we see that the market that is already quite ready for the system is the middle to upper markets. So I think previously I and NBU, Anna from NBU are working with the pilots in the small warungs. So there is a problem of this responsibility of this people, of the customers, that they don't want to have this reusable bottle on their own, because it's a very small format, and they're afraid that it will get lost because they have to pay small amount of money to have the reusable packaging. So somehow we're thinking that, okay, let's just pivot the business into the new customer segment, and we're going into the middle and upper markets for now, because of the readiness of the customers, I think, because of that. And sometimes in Indonesia, people are following examples. So we're thinking of that maybe this middle and upper market can give more example by providing them options to have this packaging swap system or refilling systems. So it really depends on them. As you can see in our win model on the left, so we call it warung happy. It's actually not a real warung like the warung that Hasi mentioned before. It's a warung, it means that retailers or cafes, zero waste stores, anything that has operational hours. So we want to make sure that the product is sold in operational hours. So it's not like, a business that sometimes closed, sometimes not, because in warung we face these problems as well. And while this warung, we call it warung, is selling our products as the reseller, we also sell the products for them, because their cafes, they need cleaning products such as dishwasher soap and also floor cleaner and everything. And also there is also end customers where the people can directly buy on to the retailers, to the warung, and they can buy in our website and settle all the payment and the order there. And if they want to get the products delivered to their address, whichever even it's office, homes, or just whichever they like, as long as it's within our delivery service area, they can have it delivered. Or if they want to pick it up, it's just they really don't have time to do this kind of thing. They just have to pick up, just change the empty packaging into the new one, into the refilled one. We reuse the packaging, and then they can get the products without having to do all the transaction offline, which you just have to exchange. But they can do the offline as well. Why we make this, so many options for the customers to get our system? Because we want them to have it as simple as possible. As like, it's actually based on the feedback that we get from them. that they want it to be fast, because if I have to wait, you know, I don't have very much time. Some of our customers don't have very much time, and it's really nice if I can, like, you know, settle and just change. It's really nice to have that kind of fast transaction. And it's also nice, some of our customers still like, you know, refilling the experience of, like, open the faucets and refill their containers without having to buy the new ones. It's also possible. And later, I think, because we are doing this reverse logistics system, and we heard our customers say that they are in need of help, some help in collecting their waste, because they want to make sure that their waste, their packaging waste, such as plastic, is well managed. So I think because we have this delivery system that collect back our empty packaging, and we still have space when we get back to our warehouse, where we'll offer this system for the customers to, okay, we will help you to manage your waste, but we will, for now, we only will accept HDPE or PP. So basically, that's kind of things. It's quite a lot, because, you know, so many insight from the customers, and we think that is a really good idea, and we have the resource to start the pilots to deliver the service in a pilot models. I think that's it.
Thank you, Kumala. Wow, that's can you hear me? Am I?
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
great. That's great, Kumala, to hear. And so I find it interesting to see that you've actually changed your own theory of change, and that you've pivoted to a different market because you think you can also make more impact in that way when you reach middle and upper class customers, and they will make reuse very visible in the Indonesian context. I have another question for you to hear maybe a little bit more about the tech-enabled side of Hepi Circle. So you have integrated more technology to make the system possible. Do you want to say a little bit about it, to share how why you think this is important for the disruptive change you are aiming for?
Well, we see a trend that online shopping is growing in Indonesia. I think as you can see, also some big brands start selling their products online in some of the e-commerce website. That's why I think online is the new future. So if you don't tap into the online markets from now, and we will just, you know, left behind. That's why we go to the online e-commerce site. But in the future, we'll actually have this plan in mind that we will offer this kind of e-commerce like service, like the zero stores or the cafes. They can have their own products in reusable packaging and use our system as their e-commerce site. And the difference is that in the future we will have all the plastic reduction counted, so that people can, you know, rejoice of their efforts on reducing the plastic, you know, rejoice of this new great habit. So we want to make people feel more grateful about their lives, even from the small activities like reducing plastics. And that's why we want to offer these new businesses in, you know, anything reusable that has the retail market to join our system, to become the stores that offers this reusable shopping things, anything in reusable packaging. So yeah, in the future we want to gather as much as like businesses to be involved in our system. So it's not just us who has the warehouse, who has the products, but everyone can has the products in reusable packaging, and we want to help them to get the system so they can, you know, have a tracking about whether the packaging is going back or not, because this system is not there in the current e-commerce. So yeah.
That's great, Kumala. So actually you are also taking an approach where you're allowing others and maybe other retailers and people in the supply chain to be part of the reuse revolution that you can power with the business model and technology that you're developing with Hepi Circle.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, that's actually our dreams for the future, because it's actually everything will become online. Almost everything will become online. I think this retail markets, FMCGs, is also going to that way. So if you're not doing it, like, there will be no one doing it, because everyone is doing this logistic in really forward logistic, but we will do it in reverse. We'll just open the option for people who want to make business in reusable, and they can reach their customer, they can have the systems as well.
Great, Kumala. That's it's lovely to also hear your dream to make it like really big in Indonesia, in the way how you do it with Hepi Circle. So I'd like to thank you for being with us today. Please stay around for the Q&A.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.
You're welcome. So also here's your note to the audience. So
yeah, sure.
Now I would like to move forward with our second speaker. So with us we have Emma Priestland. She is the Global Corporate Campaign Coordinator of the movement Break Free from Plastics. And the main focus of her work is how to shift companies' use of plastic, and basically at the start of the value chain. Emma, very happy to have you join. I have a first question for you, and I think it very much relates to just how does the movement work, and how do you align all the different forces of your members and the NGOs that are part of the movement, and how do you join forces with all of these NGOs to create a shift in corporates and in companies in their use of plastic? Wait, sorry, Emma, I just needed to unmute you.
Yeah, hi.
Yes.
Can you hear me now? Great.
Have you.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. So Break Free from Plastic started back in 2016 by a core group of NGOs working on the issue of plastic pollution. And we saw that plastic pollution was really rising up the public agenda. More and more scientific studies were coming out showing the impacts of plastic pollution, but there was very little coordination amongst organizations across the world working on this problem. So in 2016, about 80 NGOs came together in Tagaytay in the Philippines for the first time. And we sat around and spent our time strategizing how we could really crack this problem, and also discussing about the current sort of narrative and the way that plastic pollution was mostly discussed as an issue of ocean plastic. We also identified that there was a lot of discussions around the causes of plastic pollution being individuals and their littering behavior, and also a few poorer countries, mostly in Southeast Asia. There was a lot of finger pointing saying that countries with poor waste management were the majority, was the cause of plastic pollution. Now, we knew from our experiences that this was not the case. And so we formed our strategy to really show solidarity across the world, to bring together the voices from working on every aspect of the plastic value chain, to show that it isn't just a problem in the oceans, but the problems of plastic pollution start right at the very beginning with plastic production and with the companies that rely on single-use plastics and packaging to deliver their products to us. So since 2016, that core group of around 80 organizations has grown to about 2,000. We're organizations, also individuals and associated businesses. They're working on extraction of petrochemicals, on the problem of toxic chemicals in plastics. They're challenging retailers to change their practices, working on waste treatment. We also have waste picker groups who make their living from sorting through waste. And of course, organizations working on environmental and ocean plastic pollution. So we really want to see solutions that are coming from the communities themselves. We work together with organizations that make their living sorting from waste, and we believe in a just transition. So we are collectively pushing back against the false solutions to the plastic crisis. We know that plastic pollution isn't going to be solved by burning the plastic or by simply recycling it or switching from petrochemical plastic to bioplastics. So one of the ways that we challenge companies to change their business models is through something that we call a brand audit. Organizations around the world have been conducting beach cleanups for decades. The problem with having just a simple beach cleanup is that you're focusing on ocean plastic, you're focusing on the end of pipe, and you're also focusing more on the individual littering behavior. So what we've done is powered up beach cleanups. We've turned them into a real tool to challenge companies themselves and not focus just on individuals or waste treatment. So the way we do this, we conduct a cleanup with volunteers and we count the plastic that we find and we simply note down the brands. And so this is the second year, well, 2019 was the second year that we've conducted this around the world. It's our biggest yet. In 2018, we had 239 audits around the world. And this year, we've got almost, or 2019, we have almost 500 conducted across 6 continents in 51 countries. And as you can see, the amount of plastics that we actually picked up and audited is really astonishing. So we ask groups and individuals to conduct these brand audits, and they send their data to us. We conduct the analysis and we figure out who are the top polluting brands. We count a top polluter as a company whose products were found in the most countries, in the most places. We had 72,000 volunteers this year, which is absolutely astonishing. And it's still in our infancy, so we will be continuing to do brand audits each year and working on really strengthening our data analysis and making sure that the results are comparable. So you can see that if you move to the next slides, please. Thank you so much. You can see that our top global polluters are almost who you'd expect. They're very easily identifiable brands, companies that can be found in almost any country in the world. For the second year running, we found Coca-Cola to be the top global polluter, followed by Nestle, PepsiCo, Mondelez, and Unilever. The results per region or per country were often much more localized and specific to that country. But when we collate across the world, we do find it to be these same multinationals. And the reason why we're doing this is because we are challenging these large companies to change their practices. We don't believe that it's necessary to rely on single-use plastic packaging in this day and age. So what we're asking these companies to do is to reveal the amount of plastic that they are putting on the market. We're asking them to set clear targets to reduce per item the amount of plastic that they're putting on the market. So we don't want to just see by weight or by volume plastic reduction, because so far those kinds of commitments from companies has often resulted in them tweaking plastic packaging or putting less plastic in their packaging, but it's not actually reducing the per item count. And that's the real critical metric when it comes to plastic pollution. And then our main challenge to companies is asking them to reinvent how they deliver their products to their customers. We want them to change their logistics, to go back to having refillable. You know, a company like Coca-Cola in many parts of the world relied on glass refillable bottles. They'd have bottling stations all around the world. In some places they still have this, but in other markets they've actively removed deposit schemes and removed refillable bottles and now heavily rely on single-use plastic. So we need to take a step back and go back to solutions that used to be incredibly successful, and also combine that with modern technology to make it easier and convenient for people.
So great, Emma. Thank you for that lovely introduction of what the movement's doing. I think that's amazing, how you're rallying so many groups around the world together to join on this movement. In particular, when you say on that last point of working or having, getting your movement to work with and to companies to get them to reinvent the packaging. Can you say a little bit more about, from your perspective and experience, what do you think that how can or how should the fast-moving consumer good companies and retailers change to a reuse economy? What can they do? What should they be doing?
Thank you. So, I mean, reuse economy, this is exactly where they need to be going. And we are seeing an enormous amount of resistance from large companies moving there. Most of these big companies have made commitments to tackle plastic pollution, and a lot of them have included reuse as part of that commitment, but they aren't setting clear targets of exactly how many of their products they want to move towards reusable packaging. And that's what we really need to see, is clear numbers added to this so we can continue to hold them accountable. And unfortunately, most companies are relying on recycling and recyclability as their solution. But we know that recycling is not the answer. From our brand audits, we actually picked up something like 29,000 plastic bottles. Plastic bottles are normally highly recyclable, but they just aren't getting to recycling system. And once they're there, you know, they can only be recycled a few times before they become waste anyway. So reuse is the best thing that we can be doing. And it is challenging for large multinationals to get there because their whole business model is around centralized, globalized distribution. So that means that if you're moving away from plastic and to glass, and those glass bottles have to travel a really long way to be washed and to be refilled, then you're going to have some climate impacts from that. So the way to reduce the climate impacts and also move to reusable solutions is to go back to having very localized distribution systems, how we used to do it in the past. But these companies, they have, you know, an enormous amount of them. We need them directing their money towards finding solutions to this problem. We don't have all of the answers, but if they really want to, they can find them. We also need to make sure that we're not just switching materials. So we don't want to see, you know, a fossil fuel plastic packaging move to plastic made out of plants. We don't want to see investment in chemical recycling or waste energy. It has to be reuse at the core of the business models that will solve our environmental problems. And so this is, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to ask a follow-up question also on how to create the right examples, right? So we had already heard a couple of examples from what we are doing in Indonesia, and then Kumala, we will have another speaker later. Maybe you can also say a little bit on the role of innovators and businesses to help move the larger supply chain players, to help them move to these more decentralized supply chains that are much more favorable for reuse.
Absolutely. I think you know, innovators and startups are perfectly positioned to avoid the mistakes of these big companies. They are working much, you know, in much closer contact with their customers. They're able to tweak their supply chains and to tweak their packaging to suit the customers and the retailers who are selling their products. I think you know, small startup companies are the future. They are the ones who are going to show the big companies how to change their models. And we're already seeing that. We see a lot of these big companies who came out as our top plastic polluters working with small startups and working with communities to try to test how reuse can work for them. And this is a really positive movement. But we have to make, you know, we have to scale this up. I don't think we're going to see an end to large multinational companies, and we're certainly not advocating for that. But we do need to find solutions for them that are going to work across all of their markets. And at the moment, we might have you know, small pilot projects starting in one city or one country. They're not being spread to the rest of the world. So in my country, I'm based in the UK, we're seeing retailers have you know, changing their packaging and having sort of reuse areas in large supermarkets, but they're doing it more for, you know, positive publicity and as something that's a bit of a novelty or as a test. The norm is still single-use plastic packaging, and hopefully this will change in the future, but we're certainly looking to those innovators and those startups to really show the way, and also to prove that there's a customer base for these solutions.
Well, it's actually a great leeway into our next speaker, what you're just saying, because we have, as our third speaker today, we have Brian from Algramo joining, and he will also tell us a little bit more about how they've actually been collaborating as an innovator from Chile with big FMCG companies, partnering up and basically tackling the sort of big elephant in the room and finding a way to scale up their reuse solution. But before we go to Brian, I would love to thank you, Emma, for joining us today. Please stick around for our Q&A. And I would also like to encourage our audience to submit your questions for any one of the speakers or just general questions in our Q&A box. You can find it somewhere in this Zoom webinar environment. And our team here on the background will collect the questions, sort them, and then we will work with them for the Q&A. So now I'm very thrilled to have our next speaker join us. Actually, for him, it's the middle of the night, so I think he deserves the biggest hand and round of applause digitally. So Brian, we're very happy to have you join us today. You are with the organization Algramo. It's one of the most well-known reuse cases, and for a long time around also. You guys started in Santiago, Santiago de Chile, and now you're expanding your global reuse solution. And actually, that's what, as I was just saying, you are working together with bigger brands to scale the awesome work you're doing. So I'd love to hear more about that. But first, could you share with the audience what exactly Algramo does, how it works in Chile now, and how your new pilot activities in the US are shaping up? Sorry, let me unmute you first. Yes, you're unmuted now.
Okay, perfect. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me here. It's a great honor to be here. We're thrilled to have NDU invite us here. As she was saying, my name is Brian Bauer. I work at Algramo. I work in circular economy and alliances. So if you want to distill Algramo and what it does into one kind of objective, we keep packaging in the economy and out of the environment. And on to the next slide, please. This next slide puts into context our impact. And before I get into the impact, I'll paint a little picture about how Algramo came into existence and why we're here. So Algramo started about 6.5, 7 years ago, and we started to solve what we call the poverty tax. That's common throughout Latin America and much of the developing world, and that's when you have limited and volatile incomes. You spend a lot of money because you're buying things in small format packaging, and you're buying it frequently from like small family-owned neighborhood stores. And when you buy that way, you typically pay about 40% more on a per unit basis for the food, or for like life's essentials, cleaning product, food, etc. And the packaging that you buy it in is typically much smaller because you buy it in smaller formats. And the packaging can make up about 40% of the overall product cost in extreme cases. So there's a lot of major problems there, what we see as market failures. So Algramo came into existence to solve those issues. So what we do at Algramo is we have reusable packaging, and the reusable packaging enables us to sell smaller quantities so people can buy exactly how much they want for a fair, more inclusive price. So we're typically able to reduce the cost of most of our products by about 30%. And that's basically what Algramo came into existence for. And basically we've grown to a network of 2,000 family-owned neighborhood stores. And our reuse rates have gone from less than 10%, which are not very impressive, to now around 80%, which we're quite happy with. And that caught the attention of Unilever and a few other brands that wanted to basically look at how the technology that we were using in our distribution system so that they could sell their products in a similar manner and kind of decouple packaging waste from the consumption process. So on to the next slide, please. So what we've created is something we call smart packaging, which is packaging as a wallet. And what we're doing essentially is connecting technology dots and working with global brands. So our first pilot was with Unilever. You can see the tricycle on the bottom left. That's an electric tricycle that can be paged to your house, much like an Uber Eats. You can see it coming in real time. Our app actually it was a web app, the Real app for a cell phone, just went online for the Play Store yesterday. And the Apple one will be out fairly soon, within a week or two, depending on how fast it gets processed by Apple. But basically, you page this electric tricycle, it comes to your house. It doesn't do home delivery, it does home refill, and it does it cashless. Here's one of the bottles that we're using for Unilever. This is probably one of their most popular detergents globally. It's called Omo. And inside of here, underneath basically the sticker, like the label, there's an RFID tag. And that RFID tag enables communication with an IoT connected vending machine that's mounted on the back of the tricycle. And we're also developing the same system, like the IoT connected vending machine essentially, that communicates with the packaging for retail. So we're building our first Algramo flagship store. It's going to be open in about 2 months. And this is in conjunction with Unilever, and we're talking to several other brands. Nestle's in the store. And most of the brands on Emma's chart of the top polluters, most of the brands are very keen to work with us and pilot a system. So basically this store is like Amazon Go store in that it's cashless, but it's also going to be 100% only products that are sold in reusable packaging. And all the products, you'll just walk up, put your packaging unit under the vending machine, close the door, and then buy exactly how much of the product you want. What we're really proud of the cost savings we're creating right now with Unilever with dish soap, which is called Quix in their laundry detergent. We're reducing the cost over supermarkets by about 35 to 40%. So this isn't a system for people that have higher levels of disposable incomes and are concerned about the environment. This is a system for really anyone that just wants to pay the best price and buy in a new, convenient, inclusive way. So we're also, the dispensers that we're setting up for the Algramo store will also be scaled into retailers. We're talking to some of the biggest retailers in the Americas to scale our system into the retailers. So we're including not just the producers, but the retailers. And then, as I mentioned, we have our own distribution points through the tricycle and through the store. On to the next slide, please. So the core technology that we use to allow our technology to work is what we call packaging as a wallet. And it's actually fairly simple. We're essentially just taking like RFID technology, potentially near field communication technology in the future, and integrating that into the packaging. So it works much like a Metro card. A lot of cities have Metro cards where there's an RFID chip in there, and that just facilitates a payment process. So what we're doing is creating a payment platform so we can work with a lot of different brands. So my job is to speak with the different brands and explain how the system works and get them interested in doing pilots with us. Most of the major brands are quite interested in the system. We're currently developing the system here in Santiago, and our plan is to have it ready for scaling out of Santiago in about 6 to 8 months. Our first expansion market will be into the United States, and that will be starting in the second half of 2020. And then beyond that, we're basically looking to polish up and figure out how to basically integrate the technology and the distribution system into new markets using implementation partners and to scale into as many markets as possible. So that's a quick overview of Algramo, and I'll leave it to you for questions if I missed anything.
Thanks, Brian. That's a great introduction of what Algramo is doing. And impressive to see where you've the point you're at now, also in the collaborations with the brands, and especially on that point, right? So do you want to tell us a little bit more how it has been for you to work with bigger brands, in the sense of like, what are some do's and don'ts, but also in what way has it been beneficial for you in your impact ambition of reducing single-use plastics?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, okay, first of all, to the impact perspective, at Algramo, we basically worked really hard for 6.5 years. We've got a network of 2,000 family-owned neighborhood stores, but we're in one city, in one little country, and Chile makes up like nothing on the consumption angle, basically. So we really figured that we need to figure a solution that's much more scalable. We can't work another 6 years to reach another 2,000 family-owned neighborhood stores and reach another 350,000 people. We want to have a system that can reach millions of people on a fairly fast scale. So to do that, we realized that we had to work with the big global supply chains, and that's what we're doing. We're basically taking the technology that we've used in the past for our system, where we've been able to get up to over 80% reuse rates, and we're enabling and working with the brands so that they can do that. One of the most important things is that first point is co-developing the technology. There's a lot of reuse kind of businesses and kind of zero waste stores all over the world. But what a lot of them do is they develop a system first. They typically do it with a small kind of regional brand that's not very popular with like a wide scale society. And they get that system working, and then they go to the brands and they say, hey, look, I've got this distribution system. You guys should come into my distribution system. And the big global brands, they want to have a lot of control and basically understanding of how everything works. So a really critical key is to work with the brands from day one to co-develop a system and not just say, I have the system, you use it. Does that address your question?
Yeah, that very much addresses my question. Thank you very much, Brian. And I think it's a good lesson also for many of the reuse innovators out there to find a way to partner early enough, especially on, of course, the brand involved products, and so that it's really a co-creation process to develop that reuse solution that can be scalable. So on that note, I would very much like to still encourage some more questions in the audience. We have already compiled a great overview of questions for our speakers for the Q&A. But I just first, before we go to the Q&A, want to summarize what we've heard today in this webinar. So first, it was me and my colleague Jesse explaining you a bit more about the Zero Waste Living Lab and giving you an update on where we are at with the 5 reuse ventures that we're currently building. And that's just the start, as a lot more of these ventures will be built in the coming years. And we've shown how they are creating self-sustaining impact through their scalable reuse business models. So then we had Kumala speaking about how she is pivoting Hepi Circle into new markets and increasing the impact in that way by reaching a different target audience. Then actually we had first Emma Priestland from BreakFreeFromPlastic to talk about how this movement is really changing the space of single-use plastic pollution and really driving policy change, but also corporate behavior and consumer behavior to move to much more upstream solutions to tackle the issue of plastic pollution. And then we heard lastly from Brian talking about how they're leveraging global supply chains with their collaborations with, amongst others, Unilever. So that was a summary of what we heard today in the presentation. I'm just going to, yes, get my own camera on. So before we dive into the Q&A, I just want to acknowledge that we might, that some of you might want to leave for other meetings. So I want to round off the part of the webinar and just want to say that all of what you've seen today wasn't possible without the support of our partners and friends from the Zero Waste Living Lab. So this was a program. This whole webinar was produced by the Zero Waste Living Lab, run by NVU, but supported by many partners such as Plastic Solution Fund, Marshall Foundation, Flotilla Foundation, Stichting Marma. And then we have a lot of great execution and project partners that we are working with, as well as friends. So that's, yeah, without that, we wouldn't have been able to be here today with all of you. Our ambition is really to make reuse and upstream solution the new normal. So stay tuned. If you want to hear more from us, you can subscribe to our newsletter or follow us on our social media channels. We have Instagram, of course, and we are very often seen on LinkedIn. So that was it for a little bit of background, of a closure for this formal part of the webinar. And now it is time to move to the Q&A. So we have a lot of great questions from the audience. I'm briefly going to coordinate with my team here. So the first question comes from Peter, and it's a question to Kumala and Jesse. And the question is that the speakers seem to be assuming that all the consumers around the world have the same increasing concern for the environment and recycling plastic as is being seen in some of the rich countries. Is that really also true in, for example, Indonesia? Does the public care? And is this true for all market segments? So thank you, Peter, for asking this question. I would like to now open the floor for Kumala and then maybe also Jesse to start sharing your insights on this question.
Okay, thank you for the question. Maybe I'll answer first. So we're actually not assuming that there is this kind of thing because, you know, the increasing rate might be different, but by the work of like some of the advice. Sorry, some of the organizations such as Breakfast from Plastic and other campaigns, and also raising awareness about this issue, that people are start moving. And we cannot say that Indonesia has the same increasing rate of the awareness as another country, but what I saw is that the driver is in the middle to upper market, because they are more educated. They know why they have to aware about this, even though that this issue is not really directly affecting their health or their life personally, but they start to care because they start to care about the world. And why they have to care about the world? Because they have this, you know, mindset from the education that they gain from many information during their life. But unfortunately, as I said before, I think I will just like directly answer to the other questions because it's related to one another. The low income market, even they have choices, but right now we actually don't have to open so many choices for them, because they actually have these choices in traditional markets. They actually can get their rice and reusable packaging if they want to bring it, because it's already there. So in traditional markets, you can buy products in really small small sizes, because and reusable packaging if you want to bring your own. But unfortunately, people are not doing that. So it's about the awareness in the low income market is lower than in the middle to upper income market. And I cannot say that whether in the rate of this awareness is the same with the rate of awareness in other country. I cannot say that. I don't have the data for that. But yeah, for sure, it's because of that. And yeah, I think the main point is about the education, the information they get, how they can make this as their own issue, even though it's not really affecting their health personally and everything. But they simply want to have some impact, some good feelings of having, of giving something to the earth, or I don't know, maybe in the future, Breakfast from Plastic can put the campaign in the low income market to be more into the spirituality, because we have this kind of mindset and culture in our low income markets. But yeah, they're still not moving because of that. They don't really aware of why should I do this? I know that there is a bad impact in the environment, but why should I do this? That's how the low income market has thinking, other than I don't want to be responsible and everything. Yeah. So yeah, we're actually, we don't have any clear data about how many people are moving, but people are moving because of the work of some organization like Breakfast from Plastic, and maybe not National Geographic. They have Saya Pilih Bumi campaigns, and many people are campaigning about these things, and people start moving because the communities are forcing the people to, okay, at least you start something, at least you start doing something to reduce your plastic waste from your daily consumptions. Yeah, I think that's all. Thank you.
Thanks, Kumala. Emma, did I see you raise your hand? You also want to say something about this? Please go ahead.
Yes, thank you so much for letting me jump in here. So just today, the Break Free from Plastic movement and some of our key members have released a survey in the Philippines showing that 7 out of 10 Filipinos favor a national ban on single-use plastic. And I think this is really good data to show that actually, you know, the awareness around plastic pollution and the solutions for it are kind of known to people in, you know, across the world. One thing that's really important to remember is that people in the global south are already living a very low waste, low impact life in most cases. If you look at data around plastic consumption and plastic use per capita, it's the global north countries, specifically the US and, you know, rich European countries such as the UK, where I'm from, who are creating the most plastic waste per person. So even though people feel, you know, they're very used to recycling, or to, you know, to put their plastic bottle in the right bin for curbside collection, most people think that that's all they need to do. As long as you're recycling, then you're reducing your impact. There's a very low awareness around what actually happens to that recycling, and there's also very low awareness of what the plastic pollution impacts are of the creation and the generation of plastic in itself. So we know in the UK we're exporting almost 50% of our recycled plastic to countries such as Indonesia and other Southeast Asian and African countries to be recycled there, but we don't actually know whether it is recycled. I've seen myself with my own eyes in places in Java in Indonesia, huge amounts of plastic waste that's just been dumped. And that's been coming from Europe and from the US. It's been classed and counted as recycled plastic. But the reality is it's such low value waste and such poor quality and so contaminated that there's actually no way to recycle it effectively. And so this is the story that we need to be telling in the global north, that reduction and reuse is the best way forward. And we need to look to countries in the global south that are already living those low waste lifestyles. We know that zero waste communities are incredibly effective. Communities where they're working together, often with women and with the local municipality officials, to have radical source separation of their waste and to look to reduce waste generation as far as possible. And we want to take that solution from Southeast Asia and bring that much more to global north. So I think it's important to, just because we see stories in the media all the time in America and Europe about plastic pollution and recycling and everything, I think the reality is very different, and we need to be taking examples from other parts of the world.
Thank you. That's been great insight from your side as well, and I'm really happy to see actually that there is indeed a lot of public concern in these other countries too, and not just in sort of say rich countries. Brian, I see you raise your hand. You would like to also say something on this topic. Wait, I'm trying to unmute, but somehow I don't get you to unmute.
There we go. I think I'm good now.
Yes, got you.
I just wanted to make a quick comment. I think economic incentives are a really key driver, both in developing and developed worlds. And as an example, if there's clear economic incentives for reuse in the lower income markets, that will be a key driver to get people to adopt. If they're not necessarily doing it for the environment, most people will act on economic incentives. And reuse done efficiently can create a lot of cost savings. And if those cost savings are passed on to the consumer, whether they be in any kind of market essentially, that's a really critical issue. I've seen a lot of data that says reuse needs to be around 30% less expensive to kind of shift mainstream people into that consumption style. So there needs to be some basically logistic efficiencies and other efficiencies created so the product can be sold a little bit lower cost, and that will really drive a lot of people into reuse. That's the quick comment I wanted to make.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. And I think I want to move to the next topic, but I just want to briefly say something about that's exactly, of course, what also the work that Jess has been doing with his team in our Zero Waste Living Lab, creating the business models that actually also allow for affordability for consumers ultimately. And I think that's really key in driving the reuse revolution. So I'd like to switch to another question, and actually I want to stay with you, Brian, because I have a question from Sarah, who basically, like, we have just identified that part of the success of how you're scaling reuse solutions has been that you've been teaming up with corporates. But the question is really like, what has allowed you to step up to this level and to really thrive in these collaborations? Like, what were the early types of support that you received that helped you get to the stage where you're in now?
I think ultimately what it was is those reuse rates. The reuse rates and the scale of the reuse rates. So we're reaching around 2,000 family-owned neighborhood stores. That's reaching about 350,000 end consumers. And our reuse rates went from less than 10% to around 80%. In Coca-Cola Chile's reuse rates, they do have a bottle reuse program. I believe it's around 40%. So we're getting approximately double of a fairly successful large global brand. And that really caught the attention of Unilever. And I think I see a lot of interest in big brands looking to partner with startups, because startups can kind of basically develop and prototype ideas a lot quicker and more efficiently than big brands often can. So there's a really interesting ecosystem developing, especially around reuse. Ellen MacArthur Foundation put out a report about, 6 or 8 months ago, I think it was called Reuse Revolution or something along those lines, where they figure 1 in 5 products that are sold in single-use packaging in your average superstore can be sold using reusable packaging distribution systems. So, you know, if 1 in 5 products can do that, that's a pretty exciting opportunity. And I think a lot of big brands are open to trying to work with startups to make that happen. So I guess prove some early success and show that you have high reuse rates and an interesting technology. Technology is also a really key part of it. I don't think there's going to be a lot of startup / brand collaboration if there's not technology involved. So use technology, do it efficiently, create some value and some cost saving opportunities. And that will open up the opportunity, I think, to startup and big brand collaboration.
Thank you for that question, for answering that question. So I have another question from actually 2 people in the audience that refer to the same topic. It's Victor and Nila, both asking themselves, like, the whole reason why low-income groups are buying the small sachets, for example, is that they have little disposable income. So how then do you now, both Kumala and also Brian, make it possible that the low income groups actually can afford to buy bigger quantities in the refill way? So like, and what do you think ultimately is the best solution for low income communities? What are the challenges?
Okay, I'll speak to that briefly. And once again, it's those economic incentives. If you can create cost savings and enable your product to be consumed for a lower cost, and it's actually really easy to do that if your kind of base reference is sachet or like smaller format packaging, because typically packaging accounts for a pretty significant portion of the overall product cost. So if you can use dispensers and do refill, you can significantly lower the per unit cost of a lot of key products. And yeah, that would be my message. What about you, Kumala?
Okay,
Kumala,
thank you.
pardon me.
Okay. Yeah, it's actually the most challenging things that we face at our latest pilots last year. So yeah, I think if you have enough customers, you can use this refill system for the low income market if you have enough customers. So financially, it will be good as well for you as a business to tap into the market if they have enough customers who are already aware of this issue, and then you can have enough customers to buy your products or your solutions. So the thing that we did is just, you know, use this very small reusable plastic packaging to be refilled again, like using the packaging swap, because it's the system that is really familiar with them. You can also use the refill one if you want to, but still many pilots have to be done to validate the ideas. But along the way, I think the most important thing is that we have to do more research on the ethnographic for this group, because we want to make this issue as close as to them. If not, we're like, we have to put some leadership or like give them example of why these things is better than the previous system. Because I said before, actually they have option for many products in reusable, but they just simply don't do it. And it's actually accessible. You can buy rice at the warungs with your own reusable, maybe cotton pouch or everything. But you simply didn't do it. You can buy I did that. You can buy your eggs using your reusable packaging, maybe containers or, you know, traditional baskets. But it's only me who did that. And people say that, hey, why do you do that? Why do you buy eggs from the warung using that basket? It's really unpractical. I think they know the effect of the plastic to the environment, because Anna last year asked them, do you know the impact? Yeah, I know it cannot break easily in the soil and everything, but they just simply cannot connect how is it important to them. So the thing that we have to do is that creating awareness to make them connect why this is really important to do, for them to make actions. And I don't know for now, so I think there is still like some research to be done, or maybe doing some awareness pilots for them. But yeah, they just simply didn't have the ability to connect why this is important for me. it's different with the middle and upper market in Indonesia, that it's really important for me because everyone is doing it. If at least if I'm not doing it, I'm not following the trend of this really big issue or anything else, is that I really care about the environment. I want to give people like a clean environment in the future, at least for my son and daughter and my grandson and everything. But these people, these low income markets, simply don't have this ability to connect this issue with their current life or their son, their daughters, and the families. So this is actually about how we can connect this issue into their personal life, and they start like changing the behavior.
Thanks.
Even though,
Thanks,
we
Kumala.
give them
It's clearly not a straightforward answer to this question, and there's more work to be done to make it more accessible also for low income groups. I have Emma really, she would be really happy to comment on this too. So go ahead.
Thank you so much for letting me jump in again. I think it's really important to remember that the issue of sachets, it's not about the individuals. People who buy them are just trying to live their life. This is the responsibility of the brands. They should never have put this packaging format on the market in the first place. A sachet is made of multiple materials layered upon layer. It cannot be separated. They cannot be recycled. Waste pickers can't do anything with waste sachets. They're building up in the environment in their millions. And the same companies that are going to big conferences and talking about, their environmental credentials, having huge advertising campaigns showing how they want to solve plastic pollution, are still placing their products on the market in single-use, multi-layered sachets. This is a moral issue. They have to stop it. And, of course, we need to provide alternatives to people, but most individuals do just want to have an easy life. Those companies have to take responsibility, and we have to keep holding them accountable for what they're doing. So this is one of the key focuses of the Break Free from Plastic movement, is to keep challenging those companies to hold up to them the impacts of their packaging choices, how they're impacting the environment and how they're impacting communities and individuals' health, and show them that, we aren't buying their advertising campaign talking about sustainability until they actually start removing this packaging format from the market. And in our brand audits this year, well, in 2019, we found 53,000 single-use multi-layer sachets, and this is completely unacceptable. So we are looking forward to seeing these large multinationals coming up with real, scalable solutions to this.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for bringing in that perspective. That's important to realize as well. And that's basically all the sides of the equation that we need to work on. Kumala, you want to have
a small note today, because I had experience in our pilots back then last year. So yeah, even the big brands may be using these reuse things, but if you you want them to own the packaging, and then you want them to swap the packaging. But the thing that we face at the pilot is that, the warung gave them this small single-use plastic just to pour the filled ones into this single-use one, because they want to be responsible of the packaging, because it costs, even though it's really a bit, it's like only like $0.1. It is really small, less than 0.1. It's $0.07. It still like costs the money. That's why they want to get to be responsible for that. Okay. So that's what we found. Actually, it's really like, what?
Well, thanks for sharing that. So I want to move to next question, which is from Peter, and it's a question to Emma. You've talked, you were mentioning again what the Break Free from Plastic movement is doing. So Peter is asking, what if I am a fairly big company concerned about plastic waste, but I'm not a plastic producer? Is there any benefit from joining the movement, or how could they benefit, or how could they contribute to join the movement? Can you say something on that? Let me briefly unmute you again. Yes.
Thank you. Yeah. I have to admit, I don't think many of our members are plastic producers, so that doesn't matter. If you want to join Break Free from Plastic movement, we have a clear set of sort of visions and principles of the sort of world that we're moving towards. And so if you're, as a company, if you're able to say that you fully agree and will uphold each one of those principles, then you're welcome to join us as an associate member. Our core membership is mostly civil society organizations, but we want to work with companies and individuals and community groups of all types, so it's definitely worth getting in touch, and you can find that on our website, breakfreefromplastic.com. I think as a company, you're in a key position there to start making that change. You have to find ways to stop using plastic as far as possible. Join the reuse revolution. Look at your full supply chain, your full business. Where are you using plastic? What kinds of plastic are you using? And how can you make those changes?
Great. Well, that's very clear. I think there's also a great website to go to, has a lot of information. So I have a question from Nila. It says, if we move to reusable products now, what shall we do with the current plastic that's in the environment? Should we just burn it? And what do you think we should just do with the current packaging that's in the system? Any of the speakers want to say something on that? Emma, maybe that's a question for you. What is the stance of the movement on that topic? There's so much existing plastic out there.
Yeah, so that's it's obviously a really challenging question. We absolutely do not advocate burning it. The environmental impacts of burning plastic are enormous. It creates a huge amount of CO2, but also a lot of persistent organic pollutants and other sort of chemicals that are really, really damaging to the air, but also to soil and to people's health. So burning plastic is never a solution. And that leaves you with, with a really difficult question. And it has to happen, you have to make decisions on a case-by-case basis. We don't advocate cleaning up the oceans. I don't think it would ever be possible to even make a dent in the amount of plastic that is in the oceans. Eventually, it will break into microplastics. It sinks to the floor. This is important, but you can't get rid of it once it's in the environment very well. If we do support cleanup on beaches, but also on rivers and other waterways where it's much more concentrated and it's easier to remove. Ultimately, the plastic that we've already created, the only real solution is to have it in a landfill, in a secure, well-managed landfill. Then it's not creating extra climate impacts, and you can contain the other problems from it. It's absolutely not ideal, and that's why we want to reduce plastic production as far as possible, because once it's made, we're stuck with it. I think the data is something like only 9% of all plastic that's ever been produced has been recycled. Even recycling in itself is not much of a solution, because plastic, the bonds between the polymers get weaker and weaker as it gets recycled. So normally things end up being downcycled. It doesn't go around multiple trips. So that's why if you're using plastic, it should be in a reusable format only.
Yeah. Great. Well, so that indeed drives home the point again, why we're having this webinar and talking about how to scale reuse revolution. So I have thanks Emma, by the way, for that answer. I have a question to Brian about your Algramo model, and it's a little bit detailed, but actually I think it could be nice for the audience to hear a little bit more how you're thinking about it. So the question is, like, how large does your refill vehicle fleet need to be to meet all the demands for refills? So now in this case, of course, you're providing the washing liquid with the vehicles. Just sort of taking us to the sort of vision of what if a lot of the consumer good products were going to be supplied in this way. Like, how would that look like? Do we have reuse vehicles driving all around the city? And especially also if you have different demands from different parts of the city, how to organize the logistics in a very efficient way. Can you tell us as audience a little bit more about your vision on that?
Yeah, sure. First of all, the vehicles, the tricycles that deliver the product, they're one distribution point, and that's one distribution point that will work in certain geographies. It works here in Santiago, Chile. There's a lot of cities that may or may not work in. So another really critical point is the stationary distribution systems, which we're actually doing a pilot right away with a couple apartment buildings. So what we're doing is going into like the shared laundry room and setting up dispensers in the laundry room of an apartment. These are apartments with say 300-400 units. So 300 or 400 families living in there, a pretty sizable population. And that will enable people to just go down to the basement of their apartment and buy product for 30-40% less than they would pay at the superstore, and not have to, go to the superstore and carry it home. It's right there in their apartment. In the case of laundry detergent, it's in the laundry room. So it's hyper convenient. Convenience is a really critical factor for reuse. If you have to drive or go far away and do a lot of work to basically do your refill, there's not a lot of people that are going to do that. So you really need to work on convenience. We're looking at doing a beverage distribution system, and that will be a distribution system to offset like less than a liter of soda, water, or juice. And what needs to be successful is a lot of like convenient distribution points where people can walk up, buy really quickly, pay a lower price, and then leave. So it's about that, like figuring out kind of the most strategic high value places where you can put the system where it will connect to a lot of people. So generally that's going to work in kind of higher density urban environments. And I don't know if I specifically addressed your question on the amount of tricycles, but the tricycles are simply one of two types of distribution points, the mobile and the stationary.
Yeah.
Does that?
Yeah, no, that definitely answers the
Yeah.
question. I think it gives also some perspective on that you really need to contextualize the solution and the distribution solutions, that you cannot just do it the same in every city. And in that sense also for more not off-grid, how do you say, remote areas, you would need to again find and develop different solutions. But that's
That'd
maybe
be a
something,
lot more challenging in those places.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, but it's great to hear already, especially also with rising urbanization, that you're tackling the city distribution first, and you have different solutions for that. So thank you. So I'm going to put out one last question before we round off this webinar today. And actually, it's a question from one of you in the audience who is thinking about starting a venture in reuse and really interested in how to scale up reuse further. And the question is, I would like to ask Jesse to, maybe some of the other entrepreneurs can also pitch in. The question is, what would be your first advice, or what would be your advice in general if you were going to go on this startup journey to start up and create new reuse business models? So yes, would you like to start answering that question? And then the others, I invite you also to give your input on that.
Yes, of course. I think the most important thing is to start piloting as soon as you can. I think a lot of these reuse models eventually will need technology in order to be able to scale and to keep efficiency. But the most important thing initially is to really understand how the users respond to what you think the solution should be, and how your solution fits into the current supply chain. And in my view, for that, it's the most important to just go out, see how you can create some minimal viable product, and start piloting your solution. With the experience that you're gathering then, you can slowly start considering how can I implement technology in this. A lot of technology already exists, so look out for that as well. So how can I make my systems more efficient? But only after you really understand the consumer's behavior. I mean, in the end, you need, at least if it's B2C, you always need a change in the behavior of the consumers. And like Brian mentioned, it has to be very convenient, and there has to be a balance between what the consumer gains and how convenient it is. I mean, roughly the less convenient, the more other incentive you should create for the consumer to be willing to adapt to your changes. I think another important thing is to start as easy as you can. I think there's always first movers who are willing to put in some extra effort, although they may not be representative for all. Their feedback is very useful. So start focusing on them with products that are a bit simpler to create systems around.
So basically start experimenting fast by piloting, start easy, and just basically start is also one of the things you're saying. So any of the other speakers want to add any other suggestions for how to create new reuse models? Brian.
Yeah, a quick comment there. I completely agree with what Jesse just said. To take it beyond what he just said, though, like once you've done all that testing, you have some ideas, you have some validation that there's demand for your service, etc. There's a lot of good accelerator programs, companies like NVU that support entrepreneurs, a lot of innovation grants. Reach out and find those opportunities, because those can really help take you from that level that Jesse was talking about to the, you know, a level or two higher, where you can start to have a lot more impact and reach a lot more people. That's a quick comment.
Great, thank you. Kumala, you want to say something? Yes, love to hear your perspective on this.
Okay. Thank you very much. I think, yeah, what Hepi and Brian is already like covered all the things, but the most importantly that it's find the motivations for you to keep moving, because it's not like a very short journey, it's a long one. And you have to stay motivated, and sometimes you have to share your dreams and also your perspective and everything in a very compelling way. So keep your motivations and like just asking why you want to do this and why you want to make this change in the world. I think that's it.
Great. And then that yeah, it's very important, Kumala, what you're saying. Keep motivated. I want to invite Emma for the final words on this question.
Yeah, I think just make sure you tap into the existing environmental community that's around you. Get in touch with organizations, let them know that you're starting up a new reuse business. Civil society wants to help. You know, we're sharing the same vision for the future, so we can help you spread the word, we can make connections. There's also amazing communities out there that are doing the best they can already. Get in touch with your local women's groups, schools, zero waste communities, even your local municipality might have ways to support you. So, you know, it might be a long and sometimes lonely journey, but there is a whole community around the world and in your country that is supporting your goals.
Great. Yeah, I think that also resonates very well. So it's the experimenting, it's the finding support, it's the staying motivated, it's stepping into the resources that are out there. Thank you all so much for joining this this webinar. First and foremost to the speaker panelists, Kumala, Brian, Jesse, and Emma, for freeing up the time to share your experiences on scaling the reuse webinar, scaling the reuse revolution. And secondly, I'd also like to thank all our participants of today joining this this session. I know it's not so interactive as a physical meeting would be, but given that so many speakers are all across the world, I'm very grateful that we have this technology now to connect in a digital way as well, and to share our insights. So please stay tuned for more interesting stuff coming up, and I wish you all a great day. Thank you very much. I'm now going to close the webinar. Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.